Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me today in this talk, Podcasting 101. It's kind of a atypical topic for droidcon, but yeah, I guess there is a lot to learn on how to run podcasts. I've been running a podcast about open source, Android, Kotlin, and much more for 4 years now. And I want to tell you my story. So my name is Nicola Corti. I am a Kotlin GDE, and you can find me online as Corti Nico all over the places. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the podcast that I'm actually running, which is called The Developers Bakery. You can find it online at thebakery.dev. And yeah, it's available both on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, and in all the various platforms where you consume your podcasts. As I said, I've been running it since 2020. I started it during the pandemic, and now I had like a total of 84 episodes published. I try to follow like a bi-weekly schedule whenever I can. And overall, my episodes have been downloaded 23,000 times. Actually more because of how Spotify downloads file and rehosts them, but it might not sound like a lot, actually. The reality is that podcasting is a niche thing. You can see by how many people are in this room, actually. But yeah, like you will not make hundreds of thousands of views with your podcast, especially if it's not video, if it's audio only. However, I really like it. I like the opportunity to get to speak with people. I like that it's audio only, so I don't need to be like dressed up and have nice backgrounds whenever I record, and I just enjoy it. So today I want to talk to you about 3 things. So first, how do I find new guests? How do I get new idea for new episodes and so on? Then, how do I actually record a podcast? So if you also want to start your own, which tech you will need, and so on. And then, how do I actually publish it? So how do I send it to the world for you to listen? So let's start from the guests. So the format I follow is the interview format, which is really popular in the podcast ecosystem. You just find another person and you speak with them about a topic. You might just go for like being solo or having a co-host and having like you and the co-host for all of your series. But I find that the interviews are, for me, an opportunity to also do some sort of networking as I get to know new people, and is, for me, really rewarding. So how do I find new guests? Well, I just find emails on GitHub for other projects, and I send them like I'm quite bold. I just send them an email like, "Hey, are you up for an episode, for a podcast episode about your project?" I try to have the process as straightforward as possible. So I also have like a Google Doc linked, which contains the abstract of the show. That is basically like a presentation of what this podcast is about, who am I, how long are the episodes, what is the typical audience, and so on. And it's sort of like an FAQ that contains all the answers to all the usual questions that people will ask you whenever they want to join your podcast. So how do I actually find those emails, those people to write to? Sometimes I just like go on GitHub, I find an interesting project, and I search through the commit history. If I find an email, I just try to send it. Other times I need to be inspired, like I don't know where to search. So on GitHub, if you search on the trending tab, you will find like the most active repository. And those are like projects that people want to hear about. Like, if you go on the trending in those days, you will find like, I don't know, apps or projects or libraries that are like popular, and you go check it out. I try to reach out to the maintainer of the project, and I try to get them on board to have an episode about their project. I also go around in conferences like this one, and one thing that plays really well is like stickers. I have stickers. If you want one, just stop by. I'm happy to give you one. And ask people to show them, like, put them on your badge. Try to like build on your network. I've been like going around in the booth here at droidcon and asking people like, hey, like nice software. Is it open source? Would you be interested in coming on stage and talk about it? And so on. And this allowed me to have like those 80 plus episodes, as well as building up, again, my network of people that I collaborate with. Okay, so now you found out your guests. In this case, for me, it's open source, but maybe you want to create a podcast about, I don't know, running or cooking or whatever. So you will have to reach to that specific network to find guests over there. Okay, then it's time to actually record. So how do you create the actual episode? So I have another Google Doc, which I called How to Bake at the Developer's Bakery, which is basically like a 2-page manual that explains how to record a good podcast. And this is like really basic stuff, like, hey, you need a good microphone. If you don't have a microphone, make sure you at least have an headset that is not recording from your laptop, because the quality is really terrible. Make sure you're like in a silent room and so on. And this document is shared in with all my guests, so they have like this sort of mini manual they can read through when just before the recording. So when you record, there are 2 ways to record. The first one is remote, and this is the way that I use most of the time, which means that you are in a call with another person, and they both will record the audio locally. So I personally use StreamYard, and well, here my setup is quite complicated because I actually use StreamYard to record like a VC call, but I also ask the other person to record the audio locally on their machine with QuickTime, Audacity, or any other software that allows them to record audio. StreamYard actually offers a mechanism to record the audio locally on the web interface, but there are actually other software like Zencastr and Riverside that allows you to basically record the audio from the microphone of the other person locally. The reason why I'm saying this is because you can't just record a Zoom call, because the Zoom call compresses the audio so badly. Like if you screen record your computer while you're having the call, the audio quality of the other person will be terrible. So you actually want the audio recorded at the source where the other person is speaking. So either you ask them to record locally, or you use a software like StreamYard, Zencastr, Riverside, and so on, that records from the microphone and then uploads the file afterwards so you can download it. And generally I allocate 2 hours to record a 45 minutes show. This might sound like a lot, but actually you have to do the setup. Sometimes like the microphone don't work well, the user has an update, needs to reboot, and also allows me like a little bit of time to actually get to know the other person. I like to do a little bit of intro time and ice break, just to get used to how the other person is speaking. There are people that are speaking super fast, or there are a lot of other people that make a lot of pauses, a lot of so you just get to know how they speak, and that helps you like drive the episode forward. So let's talk about audio setup. Like, what are the microphones that I use to record remote my episodes? I use Rode microphones. My favorite one is the Rode NT-USB, which is a USB microphone. You can go more high-end, but this is like quite good for podcast recording. And I also have the NT-USB Mini. Fire alarm? No, hopefully not. No, it's fine, okay. So those are both Rode microphones, great quality. The difference between the two is that the NT-USB has a USB-A port, which is the square one, if I'm not mistaken, which is the same they use for a printer, which is really uncommon, while the USB Mini has a USB-C port, which is amazing. Like, that's what I use for travels, and the NT-USB, instead I have it installed on my desk. Installing on your desk means that you also need like a beam arm and potentially a pop filter. The beam arm is that arm which is made of metal, and it's really valuable to reduce vibrations. For example, if you're typing, if you're touching your desk, that will reduce a lot of vibrations that gets picked up by the microphone. And the pop filter is that filter that you have on top. The Rode NT-USB already has it built in, is that grid that you see in the front. The anti-USB Mini also has a pop filter, but it's really smaller, and that helps to reduce a lot of the spikes in the volume that you say when you pronounce the P. Try it. It makes a lot of difference. So that's the basic setup you need to have. And so that's what I use when I record locally, like remote. But the best way to actually do podcasting is if you record in person. And recording in person is amazing, but is also logistically quite involved. I've been recording like 2 or 3 episodes in person. This one, for example, is at the Pirate Studio. Pirate Studio is like a self check-in studio. Like you just get a code and you go inside the studio, you buy a time, and the light turns off, like electricity goes off when your time is over. But it's amazing. They have high-end microphones and mixers, as you can see there in the picture. And it's just way better. Like you have a conversation with another person, it's more natural. Like I really recommend you to try to have one, even as a guest. Is really fun. Like for example, last year at Google I/O Connect, I was also recording there. Sometimes conferences organize a small recording studio where you can go, and it's amazing. Like the problem is that getting you and the guest that you want to have in the same room, it's often hard. Okay, so you get the audio file. Then what do you do with it? You need to do some editing. I personally use Audacity. I could make an entire talk only on audio editing and which filter you should use and so on. I like it because it's kind of like, I don't know, interesting thing. You work with the audio waves and so on. But you don't necessarily need to do it. Like there are a lot of like Zencaster and so on. Those software already do some sort of editing for you. Like if you want to add the intro, for example, you see the track on the top left, that little, like there are 4 tracks. The first 2 are actually intro. The one is the music and the other one is my voice speaking on the music. I like to do it because I like to tweak around it. But if you just want to be as quick as possible, Zencaster, they offer like services to like, you get the audio file for the intro, they will do the intro and the outro, and they will create the audio file for you. The note here to be aware of is that editing is actually the thing that takes a lot of my time. I try to be as fast as possible, but for a 45-minute episode, I need to spend at least 1 hour and a half of editing. That means going through the episode, removing mistakes, filtering out, and adding chapters, and so on. So once you have your audio file ready, it's time to publish it to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so on. So here, a disclaimer. What I'm showing you now is my infrastructure to self-host and self-publish this podcast. But again, if you just want to start doing podcasts, this is the complicated way. It's like I want to build the car by my own, but you can use other tools like Anchor, or so that just allows you to record a podcast on your phone and just publish it, and they will take care of everything. But I really wanted to learn how podcast works under the hood. So how do they work under the hood? So a podcast is just an XML file. So there needs to be an XML file, which actually is a RSS feed, which contains all of your episodes. So you need to produce something like that. That is actually specified by Apple, and that's why you see all those like iTunes Image, iTunes Author, and so on. Every other player will consume that information. So like Spotify also reads those, and so on. So you need to have a way to build that. If you use a tool that helps you publishing, the tool will create the XML file for you. Otherwise, you can create the XML file by yourself. You can just edit the file manually, or you can be a little bit more smart and use a static site generator, which is actually what I did. So if you go on the website, thebakery.dev is actually the website where the podcast is hosted. It's built with Jekyll, and it actually is open source. So the podcast is about open source, but the podcast itself is also open source. So you can find it on GitHub at cortinico/thebakery. And the cool part is that every episode is basically a pull request. So if you want to be like notified when there is a new episode, you can just subscribe to the GitHub repo. So as I said, it's built with Jekyll. And if you want to try my podcast and see how it works, you can just clone the repo and use the command Jekyll serve to run the website locally, and Jekyll build to build the website and have it like ready to be hosted. I host it on GitHub Pages, which is cool because GitHub Pages has native support for Jekyll. So if it realizes that there is a Jekyll project there, it will actually build it and make it available on GitHub Pages. That allows me, for example, to have show notes. There are like markdown file. So I just have the episode with all the descriptions of like the links and the chapters that would be rendered by the various players like Spotify and so on. Then the other thing to also be aware of is that the podcast is about like, a website, an XML file, but you also have to host your audio files, like the MP3, MP4, they need to be somewhere. And well, it turns out that they are actually heavy, especially if you don't want to compress them too much because you want to keep a high audio quality. So they are not on GitHub Pages because that will violate the terms and conditions of GitHub Pages. So they are somewhere else. So, and that's actually what will cause most of the costs for you to run your podcast. Originally, I was hosting them on Firebase hosting, but as the podcast grows, the traffic that gets generated grows over and over. So the problem, like if your podcast is popular, the problem you will have is not space, is traffic. Like how many times that file gets downloaded over and over. Especially when a user like slides around, they will be starting to download like chunks of files, like a lot of time. So I was on Firebase hosting, then I moved over to Cloudflare just because it was more convenient. And now I'm on Cloudflare. It has less problems. And basically, thanks to the free tier, this podcast costs me basically nothing other than the domain. I also built a couple of like utilities for me to help me sort of manage my podcast, like a couple of scripts. They're written in Kotlin script. So I have one to create a new episode, which basically asks me like, hey, what is the name of the project? When do you want this podcast to be out? And so on. And it will create a markdown file for me. And I also have like other scripts to sort of like convert the labels from the Audacity format to markdown and so on. So they're all open source. They're available in the repo. You can find them out. And again, that's my infrastructure for the bakery.dev. You are welcome to listen to it. Please do leave me feedback, give 5-star on Spotify and so on. And with this, thank you very much for listening.